Hi there. Hey, welcome to Ginger Snapshots. This is part 2 of my plans for my first studio. So last week, if you haven't watched that one, you want to back up and watch that one. That one is about my first studio being in a garage and how that did not work. And then my next studio and my actual beginning of my photography, where I did model calls and actually did some shoots, paid shoots and things like that, began in a spare room in our house. So let me say it does work, and I know that there are photographers that actually use a space in their house that they use for their living space. So maybe it's their dining room and they have a customer, so then a baby come in and they get it all set up, do the shoot, and then they put everything back away, and that works for some people, especially when you're doing newborns. Now newborns, you can do it in a small space. You can actually have 5 by 5 feet, and you can do a lot of work with that. And there's a lot of newborns that go into other people's houses to do it for them in their home, and I think that's great. That's just not, I just don't have that desire to go in and lug all of that equipment. I like to have everything right there where I'm at. So my first studio that I actually worked in was a spare room in our house, and it actually worked out pretty good because it was on that level of our house was the spare room, the bathroom with the laundry room in it, and then a family room. And so when I had customers come in, they could go right there on that level and not have to go any part of the house because there was the bathroom. And the family room had a big TV in it, and had a big sectional couch so that they had plenty of comfort to sit and wait. And then the spare room. Now here's where the catch is. The spare room was about 10 by 12, so it's a very small space. And like I've been saying, you can do a lot in a small space, but I had a lot of equipment, so then you have to take that into consideration. So I got my little posing, and I'll save this for another episode coming up, the different posing tables that I worked on and that type of thing. But the first one I had was a posing bean bag, and I had opted to get a square one so that I could make my own frame out of PVC pipe. And part of it was practicality, part of it was I just thought it would work in space. I just thought that would be great. Part of it was cost. It just seemed more cost effective to build my own frame out of material that was not very expensive and build it the shape and height that I wanted to. So I had that in one corner, and I had to come up with a way to do like most of the shots that I did for newborns with the props. Like you have the posing bed, and then you have the props, which would be like a bucket posing on a little bed, that type of thing. You need an area for that. That room was carpeted, and so you can't really do a lot on carpet. So I built a platform. That same laminate floor that we had left over, I think I even discussed that in the last episode. We had put new laminate floor down across our first level, where you come in and there's the living room, hallway, and kitchen, and we had converted all that into a laminate flooring. And so I had leftover pieces for that, and that was perfect for me to make a little platform. And it was maybe 6 feet wide, and maybe 4 or 5 feet, 4 feet out maybe. But we just took those and glued them together, and then flipped them over and glued a big piece of 2x4 across it, so that when it was on the ground, the 2x4 raised it up a little bit above the carpet, and it was stayed together nicely. And so that was the platform that I used, and then I did exactly the same thing for the back. So it was just the bottom, and then the back that was against the wall, we did some of that strong Velcro and Velcroed it to the wall. And that was my platform. So I did all of those little shoots with that, with the little bucket, that type of thing. I invested in a little carpeted roll-up mat. Neoprene is what they call it, and it was a white wood, so I had white wood, I had the dark wood, and then actually that little thing worked really well if I wanted to change it out. Like I did one session with a newborn that that she wanted all pink, and so I just I had that little platform built, and the backdrop, the clamps would hold on to it, so it could be serve on the back of it, and then you just put something down on the ground. So that actually worked really great. I used one light, and it was a pretty the Godox SK400II. So that was my one light. And when I first started out, I had the 7-foot PLM, parabolic light umbrella. And so I used that. But I soon really discovered that it was too small for that space. I mean, when you have the light, it's almost hitting the ceiling. It just took up most of the room, so I switched out to a 64-inch, best decision ever. And so I had that, and then I had a shelf that had my wooden props in it. I had a nice, beautiful sized closet in that room, and so I hung up all my backdrops and my little baby outfits and the little there's some outfits that I've made that you put them on them and it looks like they're wrapped, but it's just kind of a cheater thing. So things like that. So I just put it in there, and then I had another shelf that had my photography equipment, my extra lenses and things like that. And for a while it worked really great. And anybody that's watching that thinks that, you'd like to do a studio, I would say yes, you can use the room in your house and do this. And there are people that are really good at organizing, and this is where I kind of struggled until I learned what I was going to use. I didn't organize real well, and then as I was using the equipment, I learned, okay, I'm not using this as much. This one needs to be in hand's reach. This one needs to be, and I learned how to use what I had in there and to organize it. And then I went through a couple different ideas for how to pose and, what was the best way to use that space. But when I started as the babies that I did some newborns, I first did my newborn model calls from that space. I had got all of that set up and I felt like I was ready. I had the light, I had practiced, I was ready to make the call. I had taken so much training, things like that. So then I did my model calls and I had them in there, and it worked out. It really worked out perfect. I mean, it was great. I learned a lot. So from there, it was working out, and I started, advertising on Facebook and some places like that I was really open for business. And I got my first paid customer, I think, within a few months. Keep in mind that I began when COVID began in the United States, so it was a slow start in a way, because just as soon as I got my first paid customer, everybody was shut down and they weren't allowed to do, photography was non-essential. Not in my mind, but it was considered non-essential. And so there was a slow start to that at that time. But it was enough of a start, and then, just a temporary shutdown, and then I got people back in there, that I learned how to use that space. And but the thing is that when I had those babies, the parents a lot of times come back, they want to have the 6-month shoot, or the cake smash for the 1 year. So I was getting them coming back in, and I still had that same space. And one of my first ones was a 6-month shoot, and so I had that little space. But what I started to find out was that a lot of times, like they want the cake smash, that's going to be a bigger area, because you want to get back. You have different themes for cake smashing, so you want to get back and you want to take that picture. And so and then also, so you want to have a bigger space for that. And when I would rearrange everything, I realized that I could only get back so far. When you're talking about 10 or 12 feet, and I remember that I arranged my furniture and the posing bed and the shelves in a way that gave me more room I tried to do it to where I had the maximum space on the floor to get around, to move around. I wanted to have a chair for the parents, because the mother at least always wants to kind of watch and see what's going on and wants to be close by. So I try to have that chair, you got that big light, and you got that. And so I remember I was so excited. I had rearranged everything, and I had the most space on the floor that I could come up with. But I realized I had to have, and I created a little space on the wall that had nothing. It was just so that I could back up far enough to get the whole little set in for those cake smashes, or those 6-month shoots, or the 1-year shoot. And so that was a challenge, and it was a very hard challenge. And then it seemed like that light was just always in the way, because I wanted to have the parents in there. And a lot of times parents will bring somebody else, their mother, their sister, things like that. They have a sibling with them. And so then there's more than one person in there. So you've got, maybe 3 adults in one room with the baby, and you're taking pictures, and you've got all that equipment. And then there were parents that wanted to take pictures with their baby. And I wanted to offer that. Now, some photographers exclusively, they only do newborns. They don't do anything else, and that's it. But I wanted to be able to offer that. So we tried a couple times. I've got, I tell the parents, well, this is the space I've got. If you want to sit on the floor with the baby, oh yeah, that's fine. Because they just wanted to have that memory of them with the baby. And it worked out, but I knew I wanted to do more than that. And then, I started to want to do some headshots. And I could do headshots if I had it lined up in the room and I stood in the hallway and took a picture. So I'm trying to say the pros and the cons and what I learned, and in a lot of ways it worked out perfect. I mean, I loved having where it was in my house right there, to have the bathroom right there and to have the family room and to be able to use it. So in that aspect, it was perfect, and it was warm and cozy in that room, and we had the room white, and that light just bounced so nice, and I didn't have to have multiple lights. I had a little a flash and my strobe light, and that worked. I did end up buying 3 more lights while I was in that space, and one of them was to get a battery operated one that I didn't have to keep plugged in, and actually was able to lower the setting down more for newborns because I didn't want to overexpose. So different things like that. It worked great, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. And at the same time of saying all that, there were the issues of never having enough room because of what I wanted to do. If I just stuck with newborns and I didn't want to do the parent shots, maybe I could still be doing it. And then there's the whole issue of the house. As soon as you're doing it in the house, it's like my house became the photography studio. So if my husband was home, he felt like, he had to let me do my thing, and he had to kind of stay out of the way, and you don't want to go in that room. You don't want to interrupt anything. I have 3 dogs. I had 2 at the time, and you got to put them up and get them, in a room and things like that. So there's things like that you have to take into consideration. You always have to have your house you don't always have to, but I feel like I always had to have it spotless, because you just want it to be perfect for when people come in, and that affects your whole house. It feels like it anyways. And so then, there's nothing wrong with having, keeping your house clean on a daily basis, but most people are, you leave your shoes out, or things like that you wouldn't do when you have people coming over, that you pick those shoes up, you put this away, you put that away, and that was what we were doing constantly. And so it's good and bad. I mean, I was had my house straightened more than I ever had before, probably, but at the same time, it felt like you lived kind of in the studio in a way. So there's that con, and to some people that's not a con, but I wanted to have a dedicated space to have my studio, a space that I could go to that was large enough for me, and that I could spread out kind of and do my thing without it affecting the rest of the house, and everybody could do what they want to do in the house, however. And so that was when we decided we needed a bigger space. If we can't say, oh, it wasn't working, because it was working and we could make it work, and if I had to go back, I think I could. But we knew we wanted to build something, and that was when we decided, yep, we're gonna have to do something else. And I still didn't want to do the commercial space. I knew I wanted to build a studio in my yard, and that was a whole nother process that began of setting, where do you start, how do you do it, and that is going to be the next episode, because that's probably a couple episodes. That whole building process was so much involved, and exciting, and work, tiring, exhausting, seemed like it'd never get done, exciting, things like that. You just went through the whole gamut when we did that. But we worked out all of the details, and so here we go. At the end of this video, I would just say that my first studio was in a spare room, and it worked great, and I wanted more space. And I sure would not ever want to discourage anyone from using the garage or the home studio space in their house. You could really do anything you want and make it work. And it doesn't even have to be a large space. It really doesn't. So I would encourage anybody thinking about doing a studio, Go for it, do it, learn, experiment, see what you can do. And then if you have, money for commercial space in a city that has, a nice location, then go for it too. But I think that starting out at home is just a great thing. And I did enjoy it. And I think my customers did too. So that's it for this episode. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed my story. And I'll see you next time. Don't forget, hit like and subscribe. Bye.